Do you take your worries seriously? Today we're going to talk about why that's really, really important. Hi, Shannon Waller here, and welcome to the Team Success Podcast. I had a conversation recently with a really good friend. He's also been a client at Strategic Coach. And we had this great conversation because he kind of still checks in with me regularly. And what came to the surface was that there was an event that was coming up for him, and he had some kind of worries about it. And this is something he does regularly for his clients. And I wanted to help him because it looked like he wasn't really looking forward to it that much. He had a few things he was anxious about. So I said, you know what, let's approach this a little bit differently, because he had mentioned in passing he was worried. I said, you know what, let's take your worries seriously. He goes, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, you know what, instead of just having those thoughts and concerns run around in your head, let's actually get them down on paper and think them through. And then as we did this process, and I'll describe it to you in a little bit more detail in just a moment, all of a sudden it was like, oh my gosh, this is a really good idea. I want to share it on the Team Success Podcast because I think it's critical. We have so many thoughts in our mind sometimes, and we try and bat them away. They're like, well, I was going to say butterflies, but that looks a little too positive. Maybe they're bats. They're flying around, getting caught in things. And we're like, oh my gosh, I shouldn't be having these thoughts. And we try and get them away. But the truth is, I think if we were to actually take them seriously and write them down and treat them as obstacles, and we have an amazing tool for this called the strategy circle, then we could actually work it through. And so that's exactly what I did with my friend. And by the way, if you want to check this out, and I love that I can make all these awesome resources available for you. So the new book, and this is pretty recent, is called Your Life as a Strategy Circle. And this is exactly the exercise that I did with my friend. So what we did and how the exercise works is we wrote down, okay, what's the goal? What did he want to have happen? And then what was the result of this event? How do you want people to feel? How many people were there? Did they bring guests? What was the location like? What was the food? And really painted a great picture, an awesome picture of what a successful event would look like. And this is a really important part of the process, is to not just say, okay, this is what I want to have happen, and always look at it from something that's in the future. You actually want to go to the future and paint the picture. So the goal is what you want to have happen. The result is, what does it look like when it's done, and done really, really well? The result is powerful, and there is a distinction between the two. People use the words interchangeably sometimes, but I want to encourage you to actually make that distinction. A goal is something you want in the future. The result is, what does it look like when it's done, and done really, really well? This is what you're hoping to accomplish. And it really works better if it's not just your intellectual idea, but I want you to, how does it feel? How does it sound? If you're having food, how yummy is it? You know, all of the details that involve the senses as you're describing this result. You want people giving you high fives or handshakes or hugs as they walk out. That would be a really great result. And then after you really clearly define that result, what are all of the obstacles in the way? Those are the concerns that were, worrying my friend. And so we laid them out. And it was fun because I was on the phone with him, and I was writing, by the way, he's 3,000 miles away. So I was writing them down, and he was writing them down where he was. So it was kind of this fun collaboration. We were just on the phone. We weren't even on Zoom or anything else. We wrote it out, and all of a sudden, the worries changed complexion. They shifted from being things he didn't think he should be worrying about into genuine circumstance. Like, oh, okay, well, if this worst case scenario happened, like this wasn't one of them, but it was like if no one showed up, or the invitation was wrong, or wasn't comfortable being in front of the audience, or the guest speaker he brought in didn't deliver the way they were supposed to. We actually went down, instead of just having those be things you want to panic about, to, well, if that is an obstacle and it did happen, what's a strategy that we could come up with to overcome it? And it was great because I have done lots of events in my lifetime. So has he, by the way. He's quite successful at it, despite the concerns. And so we actually went through and we strategized every single one. And it was fun. Strategizing is something that most of us do. Raise your hand if you love problem solving. I love problem solving. It's fun. And by the way, it's way more fun to solve someone else's problems than your own. So you may want to get someone to help you with this. But it was great. And I'm, a trusted friend and resource. And so we collaborated on it. We came up with this awesome result. And I'm like, okay, well, now that we've done it, so we figured out, okay, so, he was going to practice and rehearse. There was someone else who was going to double check the invitation. The event place was booked. And by the way, they'd done a brilliant job the other year. So food and all of the environmental stuff was great. It was going to be a wonderful day. He actually had a ton of people confirm already. So realistically, even if there was a small number, he would still have a great event, but he already knew that the numbers would be good. And people had commented before on how much they really enjoyed this event. So there was a lot of positive goodwill and momentum from past years. So we kind of just talked and thought that through. I just love that we had the strategy circle format, the thinking process with which to be able to do it. I said, okay, now how do you feel at the end of this? He goes, oh, this is really good. He knew the tool and he knew that he was having this experience, but the two hadn't kind of collided yet. And so that was my small contribution to the process. Say, okay, let's actually take your worries seriously and write them down as obstacles to you accomplishing this result that you are so passionate about. And by the way, I want you to appreciate where your worries come from. It's because you care. It's because you are committed to a bigger, better future result, and you're concerned that you may not know how to get there or things may not go exactly the way that you want them to. If we didn't care, if we didn't have those bigger future ideals and goals that we want to accomplish, we wouldn't be worried. So, we may feel like sometimes we shouldn't be worried, and I was taught from a very young age from my mom that should was actually a 4-letter word in my house. I could get away with swearing way more easily than I could get away with saying the word should. So I'm like fine-tuned to it. It has very few appropriate uses in my world. So anytime you're telling yourself you should or should not do something, especially something like worrying, you want to pause, because then you're kind of beating yourself up. You're not being your own best friend in that circumstance. And instead of just batting them away, then I want you to write them down. There's something that happens when you write things down, and this comes from Dan Sullivan, co-founder of Strategic Coach. And one of our great team members, Corey, asked him a question in one of our video shoots, because we like to record Dan a lot. And she asked, Dan, why do you like people to write things down? I thought that was kind of, frankly, a silly question. I'm like, well, because that's what you do. He said, well, when you write things down, it gives you emotional distance from your thoughts. And I was like, oh, I never thought of that before. But how true is that? It's probably why journaling is so incredibly effective and powerful, is it gives you distance from your thoughts, emotional distance. You can see them, you're like, oh, so you get out of that kind of reactive emotional parts of our brain, which, by the way, is incredibly useful. It kind of gives you those flashing, I'm going to say warning lights, gives you those cues that there's some information there that needs to be handled. But unless you bring it to the front of your brain, your prefrontal cortex, which is where our rational and frankly, it's a slower brain. Okay, so it kicks in after the emotional fast brain. Your fast emotional brain at the back is keeping you alive, is alerting you to threats. It's your fight, flight, or freeze mechanism. So it's alerting you that there's some things we might need to be concerned about, but you're not going to solve them back there. You need a process whereby you bring those concerns, those issues, those worries, those anxieties to the front so that you can look at them and bring your rational mind into play. This is not making either one better or worse than the other. It's just utilizing your full brain here so that you can rationally think them through, and then all of a sudden things integrate. They fall into place. The pieces of the puzzle fit together, and you're like, oh, okay, this is going to be really fun. Again, you're using your emotional capabilities to fill out that amazing result that you want. And then you're also using your rational mind to think through, how can I solve that problem if it does happen? That's an incredibly reassuring process when you do it. So I was really excited to share this with you because it was a really cool experience. And I learned something like, oh my gosh, taking our worries seriously. By that, I mean writing them down and solving them and figuring them out, coming up with strategies, coming up with alternatives. And if you don't have one, good. Who do you know that does? This is a chance for you to be resourceful here, is really empowering. And all of a sudden, he was looking at this strategy circle that he'd written out. He's like, oh, I can totally do this. It's going to be an amazing event. I'm like, it totally will be. It would have been anyway, but he would have been way more stressed about it. So he got to be calmer and more confident, which he's an amazingly capable human being. So it was really fun to kind of facilitate this thinking process. But I thought, there's lots more people that this can benefit. Next time you're feeling kind of anxious about something or worried, first of all, figure out what the result is you're thinking about accomplishing, because that may be part of it. That part of it may not have bubbled up to the surface and you may not be really clear yet. Once you get clear on the result that you're looking to accomplish, things will start to make more sense. And then write down your obstacles, write down those things, write down your worries and identify them and delineate them. It's really important that you separate them. You can't just say, I'm scared. Well, you can, but it won't be that helpful. You can say, okay, well, I'm scared that what won't happen, or I'm scared that what will happen, or I'm concerned that, or I'm worried that. Get really detailed. This is an opportunity to be specific here. And then as you look at it, you go, okay, well, if that did happen, how could I respond creatively, not just freak out? How could I respond? Or else who do I know who could help me? Or if I don't know the answer, who do I know who does? Or how can I find out? And then all of a sudden you're in motion, you're taking action, you're creative, you're responsive, all of those great things, which is how we got to be as successful as we are in the first place. I could keep going over and over this, but I think you've got the idea. So anyway, I was really excited about this. I thought, I know a lot of people with a lot of worries. And if there's a strategy and a way to help get this thinking process clearer for people so they could actually take action and alleviate their concerns, because, sometimes we just ignore them, but they eat us up on the inside. So if we can get them out, we can look at them and we can get strategic about it, it is all good. And we will frankly produce even better results and have a bigger impact, which is what we're up to. So I hope this is useful for your team success. Certainly bring in some team members as you go to solve your worries and your strategy circle. Again, definitely check out Your Life as a Strategy Circle. I'm so excited that Dan wanted to kind of bring this out again. It's 30 years since he created it. It actually is the founding tool of Strategic Coach. His story is fantastic. I also use the strategy circle to decide to get married. You'll have to hear that story a little bit later. But really, it is a very powerful thinking tool. And if you can use it to help alleviate your concerns and to take them seriously, it will definitely have done its job. I hope you found this conversation useful and interesting. Please let me know at questions@strategiccoach.com. And as always, here's to your team success.
The Team Success video series is a brand new online learning platform to give your team the tools to thrive in an entrepreneurial business. Whether you have 5 team members or 500, Shannon Waller provides expert strategies for confidence, harmony, and success. You're just one click away at teamsuccessvideoseries.com.